Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Zoom. We're going to be talking about the myths of therapy or myths about therapy. And my name is Elisa Martinez. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. And I love to help anxious overthinkers, overwhelmed helpers, and burned out professionals to find calm, ease, and confidence in themselves. And I am joined today by Carmen Montenegro-Sis. And Carmen, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you do, where you are?
Yes, so my name is Carmen Montenegro-Sis, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Southern California. And I work with therapists and helping them move from burnt out to revived. So that's me.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you have an online practice? Do you see clients in person?
It's all virtual.
Okay, yeah, me too. So we're online. And we are doing the Zoom instead of a live because we had a lot of technical issues before, but we are going to dive in. And Carmen had approached me about doing this live around the myths around therapy. And I'm wondering, Carmen, if you wouldn't mind sharing, there's something about this topic that really spoke to you that you wanted to talk about. And I'm just kind of wondering, as a therapist, what that was.
Yeah, I think ever since I feel like when I started my traineeship, it was like I want to be able to work with, Hispanic people and be able to help destigmatize, mental health services. And I mean, so I think I'm biased because, I'm a therapist myself, but I think it's just amazing the kind of work that we get to do. It's like no other. And I feel like it's a real gift. And I'm like, man, this is something amazing that everybody should try. And, I'm all for helping people clear out the myths and to be honest, help them stop self-sabotaging as well, too, getting in the way of um, for themselves to stop getting in the way so that they can get the help that they really need and they deserve, they're worthy of.
Yeah, that is so well said. And I'm totally biased too. I'm a therapist, right? And before I became a therapist, I remember there was a time in my life where I wouldn't have gone to therapy. It was like, no way. So
Hmm.
we're going to dive in and start talking about some of these misconceptions that people have around therapy. And so one of the first ones that you had brought up to me when we were first talking about this is this idea that therapy is for crazy people.
Right.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I, hear that a lot too. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think people often think that you have to be going through like a crisis or something terrible needs to be going on severe, or you have to have like a mental disorder in order to get help. But really, what I found is that therapy is for human beings. And oftentimes, I feel like people will value their physical health more so than their mental health. For example, seeing a doctor, that would be an example. And um, so people, I think, under like beneath that is like this idea of like, oh wow, if this person needs help, then there must be something wrong with them. But I think it also, like, their society and then maybe even like our culture um, kind of shapes our belief systems around whether we are open or not open to therapy.
Yeah, no, exactly. And a lot of times, when we think of the word like crazy, right, we think of somebody who has maybe a more severe mental health disorder, right? And as human beings, life is stressful, right? There's all kinds of things that are coming at us. And sometimes life becomes overwhelming and it overwhelms the coping skills that we currently have, right? And so
Right.
therapy can be a really good way to, help you learn not only how to cope, but kind of how to heal some of that underlying stuff that maybe keeps you stuck. right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so the other question that we were seeing come up, or that you had mentioned, was that, seeing a therapist is a sign of weakness, right? And I hear this a lot too. I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, that couldn't be further from the truth. Because therapy is for the courageous. Like, I think people, when they hear the word or a sign of weakness, they have like a negative connotation to it, like a defect in a person's character. But I would invite people to think about a weakness like a growth area. And I really think it takes a lot of guts to like look at yourself, to be vulnerable with another person, and to allow yourself to like bear yourself emotionally in
Mm.
front of another person. So there's nothing weak about that. That takes a lot of courage, being able to act um, in spite of fear is a courageous act.
Mm.
And I wanted to also mention that I can relate to some of this because as a therapist, I've had people who are well intention in my life say something like, oh, I wonder what's wrong with Carmen that she's in therapy. And
Mhm.
so I think that there's this shame around getting therapy just in general, but then even as a therapist yourself, where maybe some of us feel like, oh, we have to be superhuman, like, or superwoman, like we have to have our shit together. I mean, we probably should try to work whatever issues we have out in therapy, but yeah, like everyone's a work in progress. And just because you're a therapist doesn't mean that you don't need therapy. Like, if anything, we need to be practicing what we're preaching to our clients, right? Or what
Exactly.
do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm going to go out and say it. I think some of the best therapists are therapists who are having their own therapy or who have been in therapy, right? Because sometimes you can be in therapy off and on. Sometimes you might go for a stretch of time with therapy. Some people do it ongoing. Some people do it once in a while. But I really, really think for therapists, it's important that we be in our own therapy, at different points in our lives and in our career. And I love what you said about going to therapy it's really a courageous act. And I know in my practice, I've worked with a lot of men who said that they really put off going to therapy
Mm,
because they felt ashamed, right? Like it means there's something wrong with them. They're not strong enough to handle it. And I know that attitude or that way of thinking comes up with more than, just men. It comes up across all genders.
right,
But I kind of liken it to, it's like going to the gym, right? If you want to build muscle, if you want to get physically healthy, if you want to take care of your body, you're going to go to the gym or you're going to get a trainer, you're going to start running, you're going to start exercising, and it's going to get you stronger. Same kind of principle with therapy, right? You're just working a different muscle, so
right.
to speak, right? This inner work that you're doing. And you will come out on the other side just much different and for the better, you'll find, I think, after having some good therapy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I heard another therapist say like that a therapist is like a trainer for your mental health and for your relationships, kind of what you're saying. So
Yeah,
definitely.
exactly. Exactly. And another thing, I'm wondering, there's this, I've heard people say, oh, I don't want to go to therapy because we're just going to like talk about our childhood. They just want me to talk about my childhood in the past. And I want to focus on what's going on now and, my future. I don't want to focus on the past. Do you have any thoughts about that? I know I do, but
Yeah, definitely. I think um therapists see you as a whole person. It's not just like, oh, you are your past. And they care about you as a whole. And so I think it has to do, depending on the theoretical orientation of the therapist, how much emphasis they place on the past. But I do think like talking about your childhood is an important thing. And for example, like some of us growing up as children, when we were having a meltdown, I think it's important to tie back to like, what are the messages we got about our feelings as a child? Like, did our parents ignore us? Did they minimize our emotions? Or even better, did they shame us? Did they, there's this common term in the Hispanic culture, oh, no seas chillona, do not be a crybaby. And so all these messages, what they do is make you feel like, oh, I should shut my emotions. They're not welcome, and they don't, allow you to label or give a space to emotions. So yeah, we don't just focus on your childhood, but I do think that there's a place for it in therapy. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
I mean, definitely there are some kinds of therapy where you do talk a lot about early childhood things or early life experiences, right? But I think a lot of forms of therapy now focus on so much more than that. And I think with therapy, you can build an awareness of how patterns from your past, how you were raised, the kind of messages you were given around emotions, like it's not okay to cry, or we don't talk about our feelings, or we don't talk about XYZ, especially if you have had some trauma in your past, right?
Right.
All of that stuff from the past affects how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you relate to others,
Absolutely.
whether or not you realize it, right? So when I work with clients, it's about helping them build that awareness, but then learning how to heal that stuff, learning how to change those patterns. So in the here and now and going forward, right, they can be more empowered, they can have a healthier frame of mind, they can, just feel better, right? Think in a more supportive way towards themselves. So yeah, the past informs how we are in the present, but there's a lot of therapy that really does not necessarily require us to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about
Right.
what happened.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And another thing that I've heard was, therapy is a waste of time, or, therapy just doesn't work for me. I tried therapy. It just doesn't work for me, right? Like you've tried it once and that's it, or they feel like it's a waste of time. And I'm just wondering how you might respond to that.
Yeah, I think that that sucks. That I want to first acknowledge, like, if that person is feeling that way, like, gosh, man, that really sucks that you didn't have a good experience. But I think with therapy, it's a very special kind of relationship where the research suggests that it's the relationship between the client and the therapist that's healing, that is one of the biggest factors about whether therapy is going to be effective or not. So I would encourage that person and let them know that there's a perfect therapist out there. I promise you that there's a perfect therapist out there who's not only competent in the issues that you're struggling with, but that would fit your personality. And like, really, there is. So I would say keep looking. I think sometimes some of us are lucky and we're able to find a good fit. Like myself, I was able to find a good fit with my first therapist. But sometimes I give this example with clients of, like, when you go out shopping and you're maybe looking for some jeans or no, maybe like a dress, and maybe the dress fits, you try one out, it's a little bit too loose, the other one's a little bit too tight, then you find that one that hugs you just in the right places. And so I think that sometimes, yeah, it really takes like a trial and error, just like the personality. Sometimes it doesn't fit. And obviously, yeah, but yeah, so just keep looking. But
I love that dress analogy. I think it's really, really good. And here's the thing. you can fire your therapist. You can
Mm-hmm.
go to one session and go, you know what, this isn't a fit. I don't want to go back, or, this isn't working for me. It's okay to do that. And it's okay to stop therapy with a therapist any point along the way if it is not working out for you.
Mm-hmm.
As therapists, I like to encourage my clients, like, hey, if you're thinking about leaving, or if this doesn't feel like it's a fit, let's talk about it. Maybe there's something that I can change in how we're working, or I would love to be able to refer you to a therapist who is a good fit, right? Because we know a lot of therapists, right? And we have a sense of who might be a good fit for who. Um, and people can shop around for therapists. So here's the thing, it's like when we go to the doctor, right? If we go to the hospital, the emergency room, or, a specialist, a lot of times because of our insurance, we don't really have a choice over who we see. We just go to the doctor, and we might not like them, but they're doing what they do, and that's it. Therapy is very different. This is a very personal relationship that you're developing with your therapist, and you need to feel comfortable. So what I always suggest is shop around. There's a lot of different therapy directories online where you can Google, therapy for anxiety near me or whatever, and look at the different therapists, look at their websites, right? Some of them are listed in directories. Read more about them, get a feel for them. If your insurance gives you a list of therapists, Google them, see what you can find out about them. And then usually you can do a free consultation call, anywhere
Right.
from 15 minutes to 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should do another live around questions to ask your new
Yes, that would
therapist.
be a good one.
But anyways, the point is, you get to shop around. You are the healthcare consumer. You are the mental health care consumer here.
Right, absolutely. Empower them. Yes.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And so another thing, I'm looking at my list here, and I'm wondering, was there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned therapy is a waste of time, and I would say that therapy is one of the best investments you can make on yourself.
Yeah.
Um, unless the person who's seeking out the therapy is not ready, willing, or able to do the internal work, then yeah, it's not going to work. But like you were mentioning at the beginning, how when you work on your mental health, like it has like a ripple effect, and it has
Mhm,
the ability to transform like everything else in your life.
mhm.
And at the end of the day, it's not materialistic things that matter, it's people, it's your relationships. So yeah, therapy is not a waste of time at all.
It isn't, and it is an investment, right? It is, you are investing your time, right? Depending
Hmm.
on how often you go. You are investing your energy, your mental, emotional energy, right? For showing up and being in therapy. And in some cases, if it's not covered by insurance, it's an investment of money, right? But
Right.
like you said, there are these ripple effects, you know. Um, I've had people say, oh, I just don't have the energy for therapy right now. And then I kind of think, well, maybe there's an issue here to work with. What could help you get some of that energy back, right? And so sometimes I work with that very issue with clients in therapy, right? Like, what is it in your life that's sapping your energy? Sometimes it's obvious, oh, my job, but sometimes there are, even with your job, there are other things going on within you that we could work with that will actually help you have more energy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying you might go in there thinking I don't have the time, but when you work on whatever the issues, you're going to create more time so that you can show up and your life can be fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, how do you want to spend your energy? Do you want to spend your energy struggling and having a hard time dealing with, the relationships in your life or your job or whatever issue it is that's kind of triggering you, right, and causing you distress? do you want to put your energy there trying to figure that out? Or do you want to kind of bring that to therapy and do some of this kind of work to look at, okay, what are some things I could do about this situation, right?
Right.
What are some things within me that might be helping me stay stuck in, this pattern or dynamic, the situation, whatever. This is a big topic, and I
Absolutely.
want to bite off more than I can chew here.
Right.
No, I'm a therapist, so I'm trying to hold rein.
Synthesize it all. Yeah.
So yeah, so let's kind of move on about well, I'm wondering one of the big ones that came up when I was asking people, hey, what are some big fears or concerns you have around therapy? And one of the big things that I've heard people say is, I'm afraid that my therapist is going to judge me. It's really hard for me to talk about this problem or these issues, and that's a big one, right? That's
Yeah.
a big one. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that your therapist is on your team, and that most therapists join the field because they have a heart to serve, because they're highly empathetic. And
Mhm.
most likely, your therapist has done their own therapy and they know what it's like
Mhm.
to work on themselves, to be on the other side of the couch and be the client. So, yeah, they're not there to judge you.
Yeah.
I feel like this also touches another topic, or like if somebody has, so like I think about trauma and how when you experience trauma and your sense of safety is taken away. And so sometimes, because we've had all these unhealthy relationships in our past, we bring that in to therapy. And so we project and we think, oh, well, because look at all the way these people in my life have treated me, the therapist is probably just one of them. So I
Mhm.
think that also, if somebody is highly self-critical, then that's the energy you bring in. And maybe it has nothing to do with that friend or whoever it is, but it's because you bring that in there, you're thinking that other people are looking at you in that way. And that's
Mhm.
not the case. But yeah, therapists, like, I can assure you that they join the field because they really have a heart to help people,
Mhm.
to help them heal. And so they know what it's like. Again, we talk about how therapy is for the courageous. So they know, yeah, they're not there to judge you. Absolutely not.
Right, right. And there's this idea um, called unconditional positive regard, right?
Right.
You remember this term, we know this term. This is this attitude in this space of just unconditional, caring about you, your welfare, looking at you, not judging you, having an open mind, having that empathy. Because here's the thing, as therapists, because we've studied, the human mind, we've studied, the impact of earlier life experiences and trauma and the family and all that. We know that there are so many reasons why people struggle the way they do, right? And
Mhm.
it's not a reflection of them like, oh, they're bad, right? They're bad people, or they're weak, or they're this or that. We understand that it's very complex, right? You are a complex human being, and everything that you bring in, all of the struggles that you might be ashamed of, that came from places that are not they're not yours. You know what I mean?
Right.
They might come from
They don't belong.
yeah, they might come from experiences in your family or the way you were taught to think, to feel, to be. So I really like to regard each of my clients as, just a unique, special human being, right? And just struggling in life as we all do. Yeah.
Right, like being able to like sit with somebody and welcome like the good, the bad, the ugly, like everything you know, because we're all human beings. And I think as you were talking about like the unconditional regard, it reminded me of just like like when I became a mom, and because um my I feel like it helped me, I want to say, when in terms of my relationship like with God, because I'm a Christian, and that's my faith is something that's important for me, is that in the same way that I was able as a new mom, like loving my daughter unconditionally, I got a glimpse of like, oh, this is what it feels like, God, how he loves us unconditionally. And I think how that translates even as a therapist to like really just see the person for who they are and be with them, like to communicate to the client that even if you bring all this stuff, like I'm still gonna be here for you. I'm still gonna care for you. I'm not gonna like leave you. Like, I don't know if that's making sense, but as you were saying that, that's what came to my mind.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And here's the thing, if a therapist, as therapist, part of what we do is we're getting our own therapy, hopefully, right? We're getting our own therapy. We're also doing professional consultation with other therapists, where we might bring up issues that we're noticing we're having in therapy that might end up causing a client to feel judged or to feel a certain way, right, about how we're seeing them. And so we're always working on that, right? Because we want to be able to come to therapy and give you our presence, give you our care, give you our concern, use our skills and our knowledge. So I think just know that as therapists, we really are working on ourselves a lot, and we're really mindful of the way that we show up in therapy. And it's
Right.
very important for our clients to not feel judged,
Yeah.
right? And not
And
feel,
the good therapists, the ones who are doing the work, because
I
yeah,
know. And
I
so,
mean, I just want to be real, like, you know, because you're saying this, but yeah, that's assuming that ideally that therapist is doing their own work, and that the more that we work on ourselves as therapists, like the better we are, like it's gonna help us um be better therapists, and just be mindful. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I do want to, I think you bring up a good point, and I was thinking about this too. I think, especially for those who have had a negative experience with therapy, just like you go to some doctors or some healthcare providers and you have a negative experience, sometimes that happens in therapy, right? Because there might be, there are many different kinds of therapists. Therapists, are human beings too.
Right.
And so I just wanted to acknowledge that, sometimes there might be therapists who, maybe something's going on with them and it's impacting the way that they're working with you in a way that's not helpful to you. Right. And so again, always kind of, trust your gut, trust your feeling. Sometimes if you feel like you need to look for another therapist, that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. Um, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
whole topic, huh? Like,
There's a
ooh,
lot. There's a
yeah,
lot. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. And I'm wondering, because I just want to be mindful of our time together. I'm wondering if there was other things that you wanted to bring up about that, or about anything else around kind of some of these misconceptions that people have about therapy, or myths, that are floating around.
Yeah. Any other myths? Yeah, therapy is just about paying someone to listen to your problems, and I can just talk to my friends.
Yeah,
And
I
yeah,
talk to my friends.
yeah. Well, therapy is this special kind of relationship where it's a one-way street, because you are the client and the focus is on the client. And in a friendship, you know, it's a two-way street. And actually, it's very unrealistic to expect that one person is going to meet all your emotional needs.
Mhm.
So therapists have specialized training to help you work on whatever issues you're struggling with. So yeah, you know, and
Yeah.
I've had clients say like, oh, you know, so and so is it feels or it feels like they're wanting me to be their therapist. And so yeah, from
Mhm.
somebody who's from a friend who's on the recipient end, it doesn't sit well with them anyways too, like just so
Yeah.
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 And then I want to mention another myth, which is talking about painful experiences and the past will make me feel worse.
Oh, yeah.
um, and I would say that your therapist is your guide to help you work through whatever issues you're going through, and they are there to support you and give you the skills that you need in order for you to manage your emotions. Um, but I'm not going to lie and say that it's easy or that it's not hard work. It definitely is.
Mhm.
Um, any thoughts that you want to add to that?
Yeah, yeah. And so here's the thing. I mean, I'm answering from my perspective as a therapist and how I work, but I do think a good therapist is going to meet you where you're at, right? Um, if you're somebody who's come in and you have a lot of, past trauma or painful life experiences, or there's some subjects and topics that just feel way too overwhelming for you to address, um, you know, I'm not going to shove you in the deep end of that pool, right? And
Right.
let you flail around, right? So what we do is, I like to meet my clients. I think, therapy is about meeting your clients where you're at and then just helping them grow and just pushing a little further in their
Definitely.
growth zones, but in a way that feels safe, in a way that feels okay, right? A way where you are growing, but you're not, completely overwhelmed and destabilized to where you can't function. You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
Therapy sometimes will be uncomfortable when we are, in the healing process of healing things, right? Healing
Absolutely.
old wounds. And the healing process isn't always comfortable. Remember those growing pains that you
Hmm.
used to get when you were a kid? Like did your legs used to ache? I remember growing up, they called them growing pains, and like
Hmm.
your shins ache. And they said it was from growing. And so
Hmm.
I thought, oh, okay, growing pains. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was
Yeah,
something I
definitely.
lost my thought.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you. I think that your therapist is likely going to be in tuned with
Uh-huh.
you, and they will go at your pace. And like they're not going to force you to talk about something that you're not ready to. And if you don't feel ready, then please speak up and, you know,
Yeah,
but yeah, we're not there. It's not our timeline. It's not our agenda. It's like whatever um, the client is wanting to work on and at their pace.
right.
And I do see that our time is almost coming to an end. So I want to quickly talk about some of the stories that we tell ourselves about um, what gets in the way of us getting help. And one of them is that therapy is expensive. And yes, I would agree that therapy is expensive. And so are other things in our lives that we will willfully throw our money at. For example, the average wedding cost in Southern California for a wedding is 40 grand. And I'm not saying that if you want to have your dream wedding, do it. Like that's awesome. But what I like, let's pretend that that same couple is um, down the road is having marital issues, and you'll hear them say like, oh, you know, therapy is too expensive. And then it's like, wait a minute, you spend all that money on one day, but the marriage that's going to be forever, hopefully, it is too expensive for you. Like you're not. So what I notice a lot of times is that people will prioritize like vacations, electronics, like all this material stuff. But at the end of the day, like the relationships, the people, like,
Mhm.
well, what's up right there? Like what's happening? Like our priorities are a little bit upside down. So I would invite people to see therapy as a necessity. Like, for example, when you know that having a vehicle, you need to take it for car maintenance. Like, look at it that way. Another story that we tell ourselves is that oh, I've been through worse, you know, I can get through this. But if things were that great, you probably wouldn't even be thinking about getting a therapist. And then how about like, oh, if only I could just try harder, then things will get better. But you're probably already working out, the podcast, journaling, and that can only get you so far. And I wanted to like share a little bit of an example of how I can relate to all this stuff was when I became a first time around mom, and I felt so overwhelmed, and I felt I was going through some postpartum depression, and I felt disconnected from my body. And I had a therapist at that time, and I didn't call her when I was going through that tough time, because in my head I was like, oh, well, you signed up for this. Like, you shouldn't feel depressed. Like, you should be thankful. So all these shoulds, and every time you're shoulding over yourself, don't do that, because it's just going to bring up icky feelings. But what I want to say is that eventually I was able to like check in with myself and be like, oh my gosh, like, what the hell? What am I doing? Like, why am I struggling here alone? Like, freaking call her up. And I eventually saw her. So I wanted to say that I can resonate with the stuff. Like, we're not just talking about this stuff just to talk about them, but we've experienced them. And I wanted to offer some encouragement. If you're looking for a sign about going to therapy, this is your sign. Like, you are so worth investing in. And I would encourage you to do the work, because it's truly life-changing. Like, it really is. But anyways, I want to give it up to you and maybe have you share your final thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And I know there are so many topics here, and I'm almost feeling like we're going to need to do another talk about a lot of these things, because one of the things that I know comes up around for a lot of people is, you know, who need to use their insurance for therapy, right? Or maybe they don't have insurance, and they just financially are in a bind. And so I think in the future it would be great if we could talk about, you know, how do you find a therapist, first of all? How do you find a therapist, right?
Right.
Depending on your
Break
income,
it down.
how do you find a therapist? Yeah. And it definitely is an investment. And I just want to thank you for talking about me. I mean, talking with me, not about me, talking with me about this. And I really feel like we've scratched the surface, and there's just so much to be said about all of these topics. So Carmen, if people want to find you or check you out, how would they do that?
You can find me online at my website, revivelifecounseling.com.
Okay, and you have a beautiful website, and I am at elisamartineztherapy.com. You can click my bio here on Instagram at Creating Calm Confidence, or if you're watching the replay, you can go to my website. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yes.
And hope y'all found this helpful. And
yes, I hope so too. I hope somebody felt encouraged to at least, you know, take that first step. But yeah,
definitely feel free to contact either one of us if you have questions, or you're just wondering about therapy and you want to know a little bit more. So yeah, well, thank you, Carmen, and
thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy.
Okay,
take care.
bye.
Bye.